So in the first video in this series, we discussed when to start your tower garden based off of the zone that you live in. This is going to be really critical information when starting your outdoor tower garden. So if you haven't seen that video, make sure you check it out. We also launched the great indoor versus outdoor versus soil garden grow off, where I'm going to grow the same thing in this indoor tower garden, my outdoor tower garden, as well as a soil garden. And then at the end, we're going to weigh it all to see who comes out on top. To elaborate a little more on yesterday's video, what's so important about understanding your climate and knowing when you can grow and when you can't, the temperature can actually be a huge problem for hydroponic gardens. I haven't noticed much of an issue with colder water aside from it freezing, but warmer water actually can be a really big problem. This is because warmer water conditions invite root rot. To avoid getting root rot in our gardens, we need to make sure that we're keeping them below 80 degrees. A lot of people will say 75, but I've noticed you can really dance around that 75 to 80 degree range. And as long as you're adding hydrogen peroxide to your tank, I'll put the ratio on the screen right now, you should be just fine when it comes to fighting root rot in that 75 to 80 degree range. Once you go above that 80 degree range, it becomes really, really tough to fight root rot. Luckily with tower gardens, because the water is constantly being circulated and moving through air, it does cool it down. And with that 20-gallon reservoir on the Tower Garden Flex unit, it does keep the water circulating and a bit cooler than it would if I were to just have like a deep water culture or a kratky garden out there. So you do have a little bit more leeway with temperature when it comes to your tower gardens. However, if you live somewhere that's extremely hot and they're going to be just blasting in the sun, then you're probably going to run into some issues with root rot. So make sure you keep an eye on the internal temperature of your tower garden. You can do that with one of these tools right here. They come in really handy. You can just shine it right on the outside of your tower garden to find out what the outside temperature is. And then you can just pop the top lid off and shine it right inside there to see what the internal temperature of your tower garden is. When it comes to advantageously using the sunlight for your plants, for a lot of plants, too much of a good thing can become a really bad thing. So being aware of what type of sunlight your garden's getting on each side of the garden as the sun moves through the sky, and then planting appropriately is really important as well. So take note of where the sun is hitting your tower garden when it's in its most intense times, and try to avoid planting things like your leafy greens and your herbs in the direct sunlight, and instead plant your fruiting plants like your tomatoes and your peppers in those pockets of high sunlight intensity. Another thing that a lot of people will do with their tower gardens when it comes to this is they'll just go out and rotate the tower garden itself to keep those herbs and those more sensitive plants away from the sun, while allowing the fruiting plants that need as much sunlight as possible to soak it all up. Something else to consider when growing your tower garden outside is the pump is going to run more frequently. This means that you're going to run out of water more frequently. Also, the warmer temperatures that you typically associate with an outdoor tower garden mean more evaporation as well. So you will need to be checking that reservoir more often. During flowering, you're going to want to check that reservoir potentially every day, depending on what you're growing. When your plants are growing their fruits, when everything's really taken off, we'll say when you can't see the white of the tower garden anymore, you're really going to want to make sure that you're checking your pH and your water level as frequently as possible. Another thing to note there is as the water level drops, that water will warm up faster. It takes longer for 20 gallons to warm up, but 5 gallons, that can warm up pretty quickly. So making sure that we have plenty of water in our nutrient reservoir will also help our tower gardens from getting too hot. As for my tower gardens, I am moving it from this spot where I originally had it set up. It's just too intense there, way too much wind. And the sunlight's going to be a bit too intense. I'm going to be moving it over to here where I'm going to be doing all of my gardening as soon as they're done with construction on this little shack that we're building. This is going to be the main garden plot for the outdoor gardens that I'm going to be doing. I'm really excited to fill this whole area out. I'm going to be building the trellises and support cages for everything that I'll be growing on this tower garden in the next few videos. So make sure you subscribe for that, hit that notification bell, and without further ado, let's grow together.
Thank you.